Emergency Mylar shelter. Before you read a single spec sheet on sleeping bags or heated tents, you need to understand what this piece of film actually does. It reflects up to 97% of your radiant body heat back at you. That's not marketing, that's emissivity physics. Standard aluminized Mylar has an emissivity coefficient below 0.05, meaning it barely radiates heat outward. Your body does. The blanket bounces it back. During the 1972 Andes crash, survivors who improvised reflective barriers from aircraft fuselage insulation extended their viable core temperature window by several hours per night compared to those relying on body heat and wool alone. The material didn't care that there was no gear budget. It just ran the physics. NASA developed this technology in 1964 at Marshall Space Flight Center for spacecraft thermal regulation. The mission demanded near zero mass and near total radiative return. Polar search and rescue services adopted it immediately for the same reason. The distinction from bulk insulation is what makes this the first item in the sequence. No conductive path, immediate radiant heat return, and a total packed weight under 2 ounces. Bulk insulation slows heat loss by trapping still air. Mylar redirects the heat you're already producing. 2 different physical mechanisms. One of them works when you have nothing else. If you've used one in a real grid-down situation and tested the limits, drop it in the comments. The data points from actual field use are more useful than any lab spec. Reflective Bivy sack. I had one in my pack for 3 years before I understood why the enclosure matters more than the reflective coating itself. A space blanket reflects your heat. A Bivy does that and eliminates the convective loop that's bleeding you dry. The layered, aluminized interior runs the same emissivity principle, but the weatherproof outer shell closes the microclimate. No ambient air cycling in, no warm air column escaping. In a 0 degrees Celsius environment, that sustained skin-to-air temperature gradient cuts your heat expenditure by roughly 30% compared to an open reflective blanket. The mechanism, lower evaporative cooling, combined with a sealed thermal envelope, means your core stops compensating for continuous peripheral heat loss. This technology came out of high-altitude mountaineering. Search and rescue teams in the Alps were field testing enclosed reflective systems through the 1980s. A blanket reflects, a Bivy encloses. Those aren't the same engineering problem, and the body doesn't treat them the same way. Prepare in silence. If this build sequence is already on your checklist, you know exactly where this is heading. Snow trench shelter. When indigenous Arctic peoples needed to survive a blizzard mid-route, they didn't pitch a tent. They cut into the snow. A snow trench is a shallow cavity excavated into compacted snow. Windproof walls, low ceiling, compressed interior volume. The physics operates in sequence. Wind blockage eliminates convective stripping at the surface layer. The enclosed volume warms faster per unit of metabolic output because there's simply less air to heat. Respiratory heat loss drops as trapped air reaches a higher thermal equilibrium than open air breathing in a blizzard. Arctic indigenous practice, Inuit, Saami, Siberian, documents this across millennia. During the 1915 Shackleton expedition, snow-cut positions maintained survivable interior temperatures, while surface wind chills reached lethal levels outside. Freestanding tents require materials and assembly time in conditions that defeat both. A snow trench requires 20 minutes and the terrain you're already standing on. Stay rational. If you're tracking the full build sequence, the next layer is where organic mass enters the equation. And that's where the physics gets counterintuitive. Debris hut. You can build this with your hands in a temperate forest and sleep in a structure that outperforms a synthetic sleeping bag. No tools. No manufactured materials. The geometry does the work. A domed frame packed with layered organic insulation. Dead leaves, pine needles, bark, compressed grass. Thick enough to trap multiple layers of still air. Still air is the actual insulator. The debris just holds it in position. The dome geometry minimizes surface area to volume ratio, reducing the external radiating surface relative to interior volume you need to warm. The warm boundary layer next to your skin stays intact, cutting conductive loss directly and reducing metabolic demand per hour of exposure. Debris shelters are documented across indigenous survival practices on every temperate continent. refined through 20th century wilderness survival curricula into a reproducible protocol. The distinction from a tent: the biomass is already at the site, you don't carry it. The full debris hut protocol: frame dimensions, minimum insulation depth, entry seal specs is in the description. Hardened and ready. What's the dominant biomass in your immediate terrain? Drop it below. The build differs by biome and that data is useful. Quinzhee. I've watched people walk past a snow pile and see a hazard. An Athabascan elder looks at the same pile and sees a heat-stable overnight shelter with a 12-hour build time. Here's the counterintuitive part: compressed snow out-insulates loose snow, despite being chemically identical. Loose snow has variable, irregular air pockets that collapse under load and transmit heat unevenly. Compacted snow develops a uniform crystalline matrix with an R value of approximately R1 per inch. A 12-inch wall holds heat significantly better than a foot of powder. Your metabolic output fills the interior air cavity. The thick walls limit both radiative and convective escape, holding interior temperatures near 0 Celsius even when outside conditions drop to -40. This is Athabascan technology, distinct from the Inuit igloo because it requires no block cutting. You pile, you wait for sintering. At least 2 hours for the snow crystals to bond and the structure to self-reinforce, longer in dry and extremely cold conditions. Then you hollow. The structural physics self-assemble. Prepare in silence. If you already know what sintering time means, you're ahead of the majority. The next item shifts the problem from passive insulation to stored heat, which is a different thermal category entirely. Lean-to with rock thermal mass. Every technique in this sequence so far blocks heat loss. This one stores heat and releases it on a delay, which is a fundamentally different engineering problem. Dense basalt or granite absorbs solar or fire heat at approximately 0.84 kilojoules per kilogram per Kelvin, then radiates that stored thermal load slowly through the night inside a lean-to frame. Zero fuel consumption after the initial charge. The biological impact is direct. Slower ambient temperature decline, reduces nocturnal metabolic strain, and improves sleep thermoregulation during the hours when core temperature is naturally most vulnerable. Heated stone beds appear in primitive shelters on every inhabited continent. The principle is universal because the physics doesn't vary by geography. The distinction from every insulation-based approach on this list: insulation resists heat loss. Thermal mass stores a heat gain and releases it later. Those are different variables in the energy balance equation. Prepare in silence. The next item scales this principle from one material to an entire structural layer. Straw-Bale Windbreak. Wind chill isn't a comfort problem, it's a physics problem. Moving air strips the warm boundary layer from your skin faster than your body can rebuild it. The solution predates FEMA by several thousand years and costs nothing if you're near a field. Dry straw is roughly 80% trapped air by volume. A standard agricultural bale configured as a wall or micro-shelter delivers approximately R1.3 to R1.5 per inch. An 18-inch bale stack reaches R25 to R27, which meets or exceeds residential insulation standards. The mechanism is interruption. The windbreak stops convective air movement at the surface, allowing your body to rebuild the thermal boundary layer and halt peripheral vasoconstriction, the physiological cascade that leads to cold injury and progressive cognitive impairment. Origin is Great Plains vernacular engineering. Homesteaders in the 1880s and 1890s built straw bale structures from field waste by necessity, not preference, in climates where winters killed without shelter. The distinction is scavengeability. Dry crop residue, packed dry grass, or harvested reed can be sourced on-site and configured in under an hour. Modular layout specs and wind orientation protocol are in the description. If you're already running a mental inventory of your nearest biomass source, drop it below. Sod and Earth-Berm shelter. The first time I ran the thermal numbers on Viking-age Icelandic turf houses, I stopped treating them as archaeology and started treating them as engineering documentation. Earth's specific heat capacity sits near 0.84 kilojoules per kilogram per Kelvin, but its mass per unit volume is the variable that makes it exceptional at scale. A packed earth berm. 1 meter thick, stabilizes interior temperatures against external fluctuations that collapse lightweight shelters within hours. Below the frost line, ground temperature in temperate climates holds between 10 and 15 degrees Celsius year-round, passively and without maintenance or fuel input of any kind. The biological mechanism, stable ambient temperature, eliminates the core temperature cycling that forces continuous compensatory thermogenesis and degrades sleep quality progressively over multi-day exposure. Norse and Icelandic turf houses ran on this physics for centuries of continuous winter occupation. The distinction from the rest of this sequence: multi-week passive stability, no resupply, no fuel cycle, no maintenance. Stay invisible. If you're calculating for extended duration shelter rather than overnight survival, this is the tier where the engineering calculus changes completely: shallow dugout and root cellar. The thermal stability a sod berm approximates at the surface, a dugout achieves definitively below it. At 4 feet of depth in most temperate climates, soil temperature holds between 45 and 55 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. No grid input, no insulation layer, no external energy of any kind. Surrounding Earth absorbs and stores heat on a seasonal cycle, creating a passive thermal equilibrium that no above-ground structure replicates without active power consumption. Humidity moderates naturally below grade. Wind exposure drops to 0. The physics is geothermal buffering operating at human scale. The biological consequence: constant ambient temperature eliminates the core temperature cycling that imposes continuous basal metabolic overhead. Agrarian civilizations documented root cellar thermal benefit for centuries of food storage. World War I military dugouts provided inadvertent thermal shelter to troops in conditions where surface exposure was lethal within hours. The distinction from every other layer in this sequence: extended occupancy potential measured in days to weeks rather than hours. The trade-off is site selection and drainage engineering. That protocol and the full excavation checklist are in the description. Everything after this is synthesis, integrated protocol. You now have 9 thermal shelter variables. The question is sequence: which you build first, which you layer second, and what your site assessment checklist looks like before committing to any of them. Start with wind direction and exposure. This single variable determines whether insulation functions or gets negated. A perfectly constructed debris hut on the windward side of a ridge performs worse than a poorly insulated snow trench on the leeward side. Site selection wins before any material decision. Run the thermal stack in priority order. Radiant heat control first, Mylar, Bivy, then convective control through enclosure and windbreak, then conductive isolation through debris depth and earth mass, then stored thermal mass if time and materials allow. The R-value hierarchy: compacted snow at R1 per inch, dry straw at R1.5 per inch, earth at approximately R0.25 per inch, but with mass and seasonal equilibrium that no lightweight material matches. The metabolic protection metric is the decision variable, not comfort, not aesthetics. At the system level, combined measures cut heat loss across all 3 transfer mechanisms simultaneously. Reduce dehydration risk by maintaining ambient temperatures above the threshold where cold suppresses thirst sensation, and stabilize circadian thermoregulation across multi-day occupancy. Indigenous, mountaineering, and civil engineering traditions arrived at these same structural principles independently on every inhabited continent. That's not coincidence. That's convergent engineering, solving the same thermodynamic problem with different available materials. Subscribe, prepare in silence. When the fragile grid drops, you're not waiting for a system to save you. You're already operating outside it.